Thank you, Madam. Honorable Chairperson, sir. Madam, I want to inform you first, before starting my speech, that one of the companies that I lead as chairman, Amar Raja Batteries Limited, is an energy and mobility company. And this bill is quite close to the area in which we operate. Therefore, I request you to be a little flexible with the time, as I am sure the Minister and the government will find the inputs useful. Madam, the thematic objective to bring this bill is to give legislative backing to the Honourable Prime Minister's Panch Amrit, which contains 5 nectar elements, right from sourcing 50% electricity from non-fossil fuels, reducing carbon emission by 1 billion tonnes, installation of 500 gigawatt hours of non-fossil energy capacity, achieving net carbon zero emission by 2070, and reducing the overall emissions. The road seems to be perfectly laid, but all we have to see is to what extent we will be able to extract the nectar. Since we have to take the states along, in spite of the fact that electricity is in the concurrent list under entry 38, technically the Government of India can achieve this. But I feel unless and until the Honourable Minister takes the states along, it will be difficult to achieve all the 5 elements. Madam, the bill as I see it aims to act as a facilitator to achieve COP26 targets. So I feel the proposed legislation is in the right direction. It is not that since the bill has come, we are proposing to work on renewables. This is not true. In fact, we have shown rapid adoption of renewable energy sources during the last nearly 1 decade. If we are able to realize the set goals of even 50 to 60%, we will have huge savings in import bills, improving energy security, creating green jobs, attracting huge investments, and above all, we can advance the adoption of clean tech innovations, such as energy storage technologies and green hydrogen production, etc. From every angle, this bill is of immense help to India and to its people, and hence I'm supporting it. Madam, with all that said and done, there are challenges to switch from fossil to renewable which need to be addressed. Otherwise, it will become a futile exercise. I will address them one by one, very briefly and succinctly. The first challenge, as I see it, is that we need policy consistency. If you look closely, the regulatory framework and procedures are different in every state because they define their respective renewable purchase obligations. This creates higher risk of investment in this sector. Secondly, the policies are applicable for just 5 years, which will create investment risks, and biomass sector doesn't have a comprehensive framework, as my colleague just mentioned. The delay in payment by the State Electricity Regulatory Commission to the developers imposes debt burden on the developers as well. Thirdly, for commercial and industrial scale captive solar producers, a consistent metering policy is a must to encourage adoption. The second challenge, Madam, is taxation. I suggest for consideration of the Honourable Minister to revert GST to the earlier level of 5% from the current 12% on renewable energy equipment to encourage greater adoption. I need not apprise the Honourable Minister that in the last 18 months there has been about 40 to 50% increase in the price of PV modules and domestic solar engineering procurement and construction costs. So I urge the Honourable Minister to discuss the issue with the Honourable Finance Minister and convince her that in order to achieve this Panch Amrit promised by the Honourable Prime Minister, we have to bring GST down to 5%, sir. Madam, there are infrastructure bottlenecks. There is insufficient integration with the grid, which affects the renewable projects. SERCs are not able to use all of the generated power to meet the needs. The transmission infrastructure should stay ahead of the renewable energy generation infrastructure, which is not happening currently. So I request the Honourable Minister, who mastered the power sector, to be it non-renewable or conventional, to please look into this and ensure that there is better integration with the grid. Madam, with the government pushing for greater adoption and penetration of EVs for both personal and commercial use, the energy and mobility sectors are getting intertwined now. We cannot look at one while ignoring the other, and we will have to meet the energy demand for our mobility needs as well. And for this, we need to have the right infrastructure along with having the right energy mix and energy storage capabilities to meet the peak demand. If we are to leapfrog the present 3 lakh EVs in 2021 to what is proposed under the Electric Vehicle Opportunity Report in 2021 and electrify 70% of commercial vehicles, 30% of private cars, 40% of buses, 80% of two-wheelers, and 100% of three-wheelers by 2030, we will need a strong push to develop the required infrastructure. So I appeal to all ministries concerned, such as the Ministry of Road Transportation, Heavy Industries and Power, and others, to sit together and provide economic incentives such as subsidies, tax rebates, 100% FDI, manufacturing hubs, and incentives to set up charging stations as well as push for the Made in India batteries. Since the cost of the battery is the major portion in the cost of the electric vehicles, it can go as high as even 40% in the case of passenger cars. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve the above targets. I am particularly focusing on batteries since the life of EVs depends on the lifespan of the batteries and support provided by the government for its replacement. Now the government schemes are giving incentive only for specific vehicles and for a certain period. The battery needs to be replaced once in 6 to 8 years, and it costs around 30 to 40% of the total cost of the vehicle. So the government has to create a policy framework for giving incentives at least once for replacement of the batteries in private vehicles and twice for replacement in the case of commercial vehicles. Madam, the energy storage is another aspect in the whole story. India needs at least 10 to 12 gigascale factories for advanced chemistry cell production to meet our renewable ambitions and to achieve the goals set by the Honourable Prime Minister. So I suggest that the government should support our research and development and local battery manufacturing in order to scale up. In this context, I appreciate the efforts put in by Niti Aayog and the Department of Heavy Industries in recently awarding 50 gigawatt hours of cell manufacturing capacity under the ACC PLI scheme with a provision of 18,100 crores as incentives. Secondly, as I said, energy storage is important in grid integration and balancing generation of various generation sources. If we were to achieve the targeted EV adoption by 2030, while the overall electricity demand for EVs in the country is projected to be around 5% of the total electricity demand in the country, the real challenge lies in intelligently managing the stress on the grid during the peak demand hours. Energy storage technology plays a vital role in this context. There are many advantages. It improves the quality of power, it reduces the peak demand, distribution goes up and brings down the use of diesel for backup power applications, etc. Rooftop solar accounts for 80% of the total energy storage in the country today. And if we use advanced battery technologies, it will help rooftop solar installations. But the ministry had set a target to install 500 megawatts of micro and mini grids as well in the country. What has happened to that is something that we would like to, certainly I would like to know, and the House, I'm sure, would like to know. I'm mentioning that this since the energy storage market for off-grid renewable energy is huge and runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. And more than that, it helps to store and supply power to rural households. On the energy mix, it is good that we as a nation are progressing rapidly towards the solar energy goals that we have set for ourselves. But if you look at nuclear, it is not so encouraging. And if you look at hydrogen, it is still in its nascent stage. The Honourable Prime Minister's announcement in his independence speech in 2021 from the Red Fort about launching of National Hydrogen Mission and intending to make India a global hub for green hydrogen production and export is not visible on the ground, madam. So to overcome this, we need investments in research and development to produce green hydrogen from renewable energy sources. Therefore, I have no hesitation to say that little has been grounded on pushing a balanced energy mix in the country to help us realize the net zero targets that we're committed to achieving. I urge the Minister to please throw some light on this. Madam, I have a couple of points and then I will conclude. The Honourable Minister must be aware that PAT, or Perform, Achieve and Trade Scheme, was introduced way back in 2008. We need to make it more effective and more sectors should be included. If you look at PAT, it is not patting. Rather, it is in a way punishing the sector because the incentive is very low and there are high penalties for not meeting the targets. I believe if we want PAT to write a success story, the scheme has to be improved and this scheme could result in better buy-in once carbon credit trading scheme proposed under the bill comes into effect. I need not speak about our over-dependence on China. I appreciate the Honourable Minister for allocating 19,500 crores to facilitate domestic solar manufacturers. However, we are still depending on China for more than 80% of our needs in this area. I feel we need to include provisions to bring wind energy, mini hydro, and biomass as alternate energy sources. These hybrid models would also help availability of alternative sources and lead to faster adoption. Madam, land is a scarce resource. Mechanism for faster land allotment to developers is also the need of the hour. And other environmental impacts like water required for solar installation needs to be examined. Most solar plants in wastelands are in highly water-stressed areas. We must also look into waste disposal guidelines to understand the overall cycle life and life cycle cost for better decision making. In the budget speech, the Finance Minister announced that the government will bring battery swapping policy to boost the use of electric vehicles. Secondly, the Government of India also said that it will issue sovereign green bonds to reduce carbon intensity of the economy and to give access to industry to a large pool of money for energy transition. I request the Honourable Minister to please throw some light on what is the present status and what plans he has on these. With these observations, I conclude my submissions and I support the bill. Thank you very much.